Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast, where we explore the game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance and well-being in the workplace. If you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business, if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber, and if you want to be part of a revolution in human potential, then join us to discover the powerful resource that lives before our psychology.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And today's conversation is with a show regular, Helen Amery, who has been on the show lots of times and always adds so much value. And over the last, I think, 2 or 3 years, Helen, it's been amazing to watch what you create in the world. And last time you were on the show, you'd created an amazing book with Sarah. And it was a very comprehensive guide to awakening, fabulous book, which I still highly recommend to people. And since then, and it hasn't even feels like it's been that long, probably a year, you're at it again, not writing this time, but creating something called the Enlightenment event, which actually isn't an event. It is a series of events. And we'll get into that in a moment. But another creation from your wonderful expression of what life is. So, Helen, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
And if there is the odd listener who has not come across you before, could you give just a minute or two on who you are and your background and context and how we know each other?
Yeah, well, I feel like I'll start with that bit, how we knew each other, because yes, gosh, so back in 2018, wasn't it, when I was your client for a good few months? You were like the very beginning of my journey with all of this stuff. Having heard you on Gary Turner's podcast and gone, oh my God, he's doing the thing that I've been looking for. He's doing the work that I've known as available, but I didn't know how to do it, how to articulate it, how to create it, how to talk about it. So I guess I felt on a very deep level in that, which I didn't fully understand at the time. And it was like, oh, there's something in this, there's something big in this. And that was really what brought me to you, because prior to that, I'd been in psychology-based coaching, changing mindsets, rewriting thoughts, positive psychology, that kind of stuff. And then reached a point where I realized, well, this isn't everything. This doesn't actually work. It worked to an extent. It worked well enough that I was able to do my job, and I could do my job well. But all the effort of it, all the hard work of trying to think the right stuff and therefore feel the right feelings and therefore behave in the appropriate way, meant that all the effort of that couldn't be sustained. Of course it couldn't be sustained. And my kids took the brunt of that when I would come home. So yes, it was wonderful from the question, well, what else is there? In that experience of this psychology stuff hasn't worked, what else is there? And that's what led me to you in 2018. And then, since then, an ever deepening journey of this whole non-dual landscape in all its elements, all its aspects, and all the doorways, which I think we'll be talking more about today.
Well, exactly. And by the way, listeners, if anyone wants to, Helen and I did a little 3-part series back then in 2018 about her experience of sort of when she first came into this grounding behind Quality of Mind. And that's a really good listen. Even I think that stood the test of time. So that's available. But what we wanted to talk about today was how there are lots and lots of different approaches, methodologies, understandings in the world of personal professional development, improvement, even therapy and mental health and human potential. I mean, there are stacks and stacks of them. And we wanted to talk about, well, how come there are so many, so diverse, yet surely if it was very obvious and clear, there'd be 1 or 2. So why are there so many? And how come they're all so different and look like the one? Once you've got the one, it's the one to be in. And possibly most importantly, what are they all pointing to? So is there something they're all trying to get to and they're just different doorways in? Are they pointing to ultimately a different doorway? What's going on? How come the field, if you like, of psychology and even what's before psychology is so fragmented, so segmented, kind of does that matter? And what can we do about that? Now, the reason why this is so, I mean, it's interesting for any human being listening, but I always think if you were standing back as a Martian looking at us as a species, they would go, wow, they've got a lot of ways to do that potential. What are they up to? But also at a practical level, the reason why your current creation, the Enlightenment event, is structured, which I'm sure you'll get into, it is into some of those doorways. And that's only just a few of the doorways, which there are millions of. So you've taken almost like one little doorway of all the many doorways and then broken that into 6 more doorways. We'll probably get into that in a bit. But I guess to start with, imagine we're talking to this fictional alien now who was sort of saying, well, okay, I've had a look at your planet and you human species, and I've been to some of your bookshops and I've been online. Do you not understand how your own potential works? Do you not understand how your own well-being works? Do you not understand how the very fabric of your experience works? And we'd have to go, not really. No, that's why we've got all these different ways. So what would your observation be on that? And to answer the question, how come there's so many different doorways?
Yeah. Do you know, honestly, the response that's coming up is, well, why not?
Because it's fun. Yeah.
It's fun. Like,
Yeah.
why would we, like, there's cake is cake. Why do we then make chocolate cakes and vanilla cakes and do 5-tiered cakes and little cupcakes? And, you know, it's like, well, why not? Because it's fun. So I think for me, the Helen truth of why there are so many is really why not? Like, we all have different tastes, we all have different preferences. You know, even you and I with our journeys, we've both moved through different doorways prior to this understanding. It's like, well, yeah, why not?
Well, so let me take that answer and just give my spin as I was listening, which is it's the nature of human psychology for that to be the case. So although we are all one universal field of consciousness, which some people that will make sense with, some people won't, don't worry. We are individuated. I'll use the whirlpool analogy. We are individuated into 7 or 8 billion in human form, at least, activities of that one universal field, and that has its own flavor to it. So Mr. Alien, Mrs. Alien, you're bound to have lots of different doorways when the human experience, the activity of the human experience is so individuated and unique. So what I suppose maybe the other question then to ask is not why are they so different? What is the similarity between all those different doorways? So that there's lots of difference. You could go, well, one's coming in through breath work, one's coming in through therapeutic, analyzing my psychology, one's coming through shamanics, one's coming through, what is the similarity? How about we spin the question around and ask, let's imagine the alien asked that question. What have they all got in common at one level?
Yeah, and I want to really highlight that that's such a valuable question, because when we understand that it's like it's the same mechanism really that's working with every single thing we do, for me that then opens the field of all the possible ways. Whereas we might think, oh well, that we might as well just do this one then, because this is the one thing that's happening all the time. In my experience, it's the opposite. It like takes the imagined limits off and has us be able to go, oh, I really am in a sweet shop. Like, I really can go with whatever feels good, because really they're all doing the same thing. And so the one thing that I see them all, that all approaches, all techniques, all tools, all modalities, all change fundamentally happens because we remember the fact we are the presence and the awareness of all of the human experience. And in the presence of that presence, all of the stuff really sorts itself out and clears itself up and aligns with the energy of that presence, aligns with the feeling, love and inclusion and peace, and yeah, all the kind of words that we say we aspire to, all the kind of words that everybody says they want. It's like that, yeah, that presence being with all of the human experience brings it all into alignment with that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I would agree with that. So the way I see it now, the distillation of it in this moment for me, after 25 years of plonking around, is whenever we are in the moment flow of the isness, what's just turning up, and we are just in that, not as peers in that or Helen in that, and it's not happening to us. We're just in the flow. Flow would be the most common word you could talk about for that. And there's no self-identification or resistance to that. We are in a sense of peace, well-being, performance, potential, and that's just happening. That just is. And babies are probably in it the most, more than anyone else. But we also have the wonderful ability to create an apparent psychological world of me in that. So me doing it, me being something, me being an entity that appears, and all the narratives and stories and constructs and things come in. And what we're trying to do when we're going through our 1,000 doors is get back to just the flow of the moment with no self-identification and resistance. So you could say any lack of resourcefulness or flow or well-being comes from one thing, and that is resistance to the isness. And all resistance to the isness comes from one thing, and that's self-identification. So all the modalities and tools and therapies and things are trying to get back there in their own way of doing it. So that's what they've all got in common. Some go back very directly, some sort of meander back there, some are sort of red herrings to get back there, but that's what they're all sort of trying to do. That's how I would see it. Does that resonate with what you said?
Yeah, it does resonate, and the additional piece for me is the journey of that, untangling some of the tangle of that human experience. So whether it's psychological, emotional, physical, there's tangles, there are battles going on in our systems because we've collected all these ideas at all these different levels as a person. And so even if there is an absence of identification with that psychological human experience, those patterns can still play out. And so for me, that's a really, really important piece of the journey, that all of that human tangle that we've gathered and collected, all the stuff that's all the conditioning, all the ideas that have been collected, that the journey is also the disentangling of that. And for me, it's both those aspects. Yes, absolutely. What we want is that flow and that absence of identification. But you know that I think it was Ken Wilber who talked about, and I wrote a piece about, you can be an awakened ass, because you can be awake to the fact of your true nature and that you're not just this person, but you can still be an ass because all your conditioning can still be playing out in the flow. Like it could well be flow, but the way you're doing it is being an ass. And so that for me is the really important bit of the addition of what for me is the enlightenment process, the disentangling of all those human confusions, the conditioned confusions.
And we had another podcast which we called the difference between awakening and enlightening, enlightenment, which could sound a very spiritual or technical thing. But I think that's what you're pointing to again, is the enlightenment for you is the distangling of our psychology. Now, I suppose my nuanced take on that, and I don't want to go on a rabbit hole on this, but my nuanced take on that is, to put it in layman's term, do we believe itself detangles? Do we believe the system untangles itself? So all the wonderful things that our conditioning is just by being human, does it untangle itself, or do we need to do untangling? Now, I'm not meaning that to be a question about free will, although obviously that it would lean itself to that. But because I guess I kind of see that the more that you are in that space of awareness, I just see that there's a lot of natural, organic detangling happening.
Hmm.
Now, that might emerge via some expression of a belief or oh gosh, yeah, I'm caught up in that, you know. But there's a learning extravaganza, as I described it with Claire Diamond the other day, you know, a learning extravaganza going on, self-detangling, or self-cleaning oven. What other metaphors have we got? Invisible drain cleaner, right? That's happening. And sometimes we overlook that and put the I must tidy up my psychology onto manual as if we could, but we kind of try and do that. And a lot of the therefore doorways in my mind are trying to detangle something that can detangle itself.
Gosh, there's so much to say to that.
Hmm.
Yes, absolutely. It's a self-detangling system. And so much easier. Once we've awakened,
Yes.
because once we've awakened, then that presence is so known as the truth of who we are. That light is shining so brightly that it's so much easier for that. And we're now no longer identified with the stuff, with the conditioning. So yes, it's so much easier for it all to come up and out and disentangle. And I like doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we wrote our awakening book. That's why we're going to be writing an enlightenment book. Because, so I literally spoke to a client this morning who came, you know, just as a potential, let's see if we want to work together conversation. And he says, yeah, because I've been to these other two people and they've said, oh, it's okay, just carry on, everything's happening fine. And he's like, I just don't feel that, like, that doesn't feel right to me. And that's exactly why we wrote our awakening books. We're like, yeah, God damn it, there is some stuff you can do. And the same with enlightenment, there is some stuff you can do. We don't just have to sit passively and wait and just, yeah, just sit. Like, well, why? I want to get in there. I want to proactively
But
help this
isn't that
stuff
part of
disentangle.
the auto detangle? So,
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's so interesting this, and I remember this years ago being a thing, and I thought, so waiting patiently, not waiting for it to detangle, is a doing,
Yes.
right? So getting stuck in is part of the auto detangle. So I'm absolutely, what I see is that once you start the awakening, the detangling kind of wants to unfold. It starts to reveal itself, if we can use that as a way of saying it. And that will involve getting stuck into your tangles and your psychology, going, oh my gosh, I've just noticed this. And wow, I never saw that before. Oh, wow, there's something that the mind's percolating and bubbling around at and is bounced into the side on. So the detangling starts to emerge and reveal, and it's not to shy away from and go, no, 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 I'm not getting involved in that. That's something psychological. No way. That would be boring, because the fun is in the richness of the detangle, and B would be as active as trying to do it yourself, if you could. So I just find you have to resist the detangle. If the awakening has happened, you have to resist the detangle. You know,
Yeah.
as if
Which
you
is
could,
like impossible.
which is like impossible. So I think people can get stuck up. They can get stuck in that. And
Yeah.
and let's just pause a minute and just unpack something, and just in case people are like, what do you mean awakening? You said something earlier about awakening, right? So let's just give a very short bit on that. I mean, and we've got loads of the podcasts on it. You've got a whole book about it. But what we're talking about when we say this is all easier once you've awakened, and you know, our journeys of indirect path have definitely gone, oh no, one thing we'd absolutely tell the alien is awakening is going to be the facilitator to all the detangling, whether that's, we think it's an auto detangle or a manual detangle. What do we mean by awakening? We mean having a profound embodied seeing, noticing, realization, recognition, whatever you want to call it, of what we are essentially, which is, we're not the thing that was born, in my case, 5 decades ago, yours just a few less. We're not that, and I'm not going to finish in a few decades' time. I'm not a separate peers walking around this planet, and planet is outside of me. What I am is awareness or consciousness itself. I am the capacity for a psychological human experience, which is universal, eternal, unlimited, unshackled, and neutral to what turns up in it in terms of the psychological experience. That's what I am essentially. And once we recognize that, we see that what appears in that is the appearance of me being a separate 50-year-old man, there's a dad of two, blah, 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 who has thoughts, who has a hand, who has a body. That all appears. It's not fundamental. It is just the appearing avatar. And once we truly see that as at an awakened level, then all the detangling of what turns up in psychology becomes so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And it, because once we pop back and see what we truly are, there's the psychology loosens its grip on what it appears to be. So that's what we mean by awakening, isn't it? And your book points to how we can see that directly through direct inquiry and things like that. And it's a wonderful place to start. And then once people have seen that, what we're saying about the detangling is, well, then what happens to all the conditioning and narratives and programming that's happened to me, the individuated, that shows up in life? What am I doing about that? So I just wanted to give that context in case anyone was like, whoa, I don't even know what you mean by awakening. Anything you want to add to that little segue?
No, beautiful description. Yeah.
So we were talking about auto detangle and manual detangle. In the context of we're all being lived and nature's doing us and we don't really get to see it anyway. But I suppose maybe the question is, how much should we pay attention to or get involved in what is turning up in the presenting psychology? Because there's different views on that. Some people are like, oh no, make it all about the body, make it all about breath. Oh no, look at the thoughts. So if we look at some of those doorways, and your program, the Enlightenment event, has broken some of these down. There's a sort of a thought way, there's a feeling emotion way, there's sort of a body way. Let's just talk about a few of the doors and show what's similar and what's different maybe.
Yeah, and just to give some context to that, because we're kind of, we've been saying there, once you've awakened, the enlightenment stuff gets so much easier. And it's like, yes. And sometimes, especially the direct path of awakening can be very confronting and very scary to who we think we are. When we're identified with who we think we are, plenty of people get scared of this conversation. Plenty of people, resistance comes up. They think this is a terrible idea. The resistance comes up in response to the non-dual conversation. Because when we think we are that separate person and we think we need to be that to stay alive and survive, then of course resistance comes up. So I guess I really want to give a shout out for the reason why an enlightenment path, which could be called an indirect path, is valuable first, because we're not necessarily all going to do the non-dual awakening path first. And we've both had some enlightening first. We both did some psychological detangling before we got to the non-dual stuff. So it's to really give a shout out for the fact that any of these doorways are at least going to lighten our human experience and loosen the grip of thinking that this way of doing stuff or this way of thinking about stuff is necessary for me to be okay. It starts to chip away at some of the identifications. It starts to loosen this idea of being this person. And that in itself can then open enough space that we find ourselves in a non-dual, direct spiritual conversation. So, I just want to kind of highlight that distinction, that as much as once you've seen the direct path, you kind of go, as I totally did, oh my God, everybody needs to be doing this. Like everybody needs to be going straight there to the truth of who we are. But in reality, it looks scary to the person to do that. And so for me, all these enlightenment doorways are part of easing that journey, part of, like I say, loosening and lightening some of these attachments we have so that the door gets opened to the more fundamental truth of who we are.
Yeah, I think I mainly agree with that. And I'm not trying to be annoying when I say that, but I think in case that's what you're thinking, the doorways, a lot of them, they are definitely useful and shouldn't be disregarded because of what you said, which, it's not like once we have the awakening, we're there permanently 100% of the time. That's not the human condition. And therefore, recognizing that there are things that to detangle in our psychology or in our body works or our breathing is really useful. What I do think is a non-negotiable in my mind, right, is that you're still going to get the most leverage from the awakening thing, and then come back down to look at some of those things, maybe through some of those other doorways. But it'd be very different going through that doorway once you've been through the awakening doorway. So coming straight into the doorway and then working your way up to the awakening, which is what we call traditionally the indirect path, I wouldn't recommend. I don't think is necessary. I think doing them in sort of parallel, maybe as if you sort of could, is helpful. So, because if people are finding something sort of scary and uncomfortable about the non-dual conversation, cool. That's just showing how identified you are with the self that doesn't want to lose its job description. So it doesn't mean you then abandon the path. It just means you look at that bit. Right?
Yes, absolutely. If you're in conversation with somebody who can be with you in that, but plenty of people, and we'll know people too, who did abandon the path because it looked too confronting and scary, and that's okay, because then they did some other stuff, and then eventually they often come back to it and go, "Oh my God, I read this book from this person 10 years ago, and oh my God, now I realize what that book was saying," and so plenty of people will abandon the path all the time. And again, that for me is why these more palatable, easier, more accessible, human level doorways are valuable. Because if it just takes people a little bit closer, a little bit lighter, a little bit looser, then it's all moving them back towards where everybody's being drawn to anyway.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad they exist because they have got value. And you're right. If someone's not understanding what the different doorways are, or bangs into something non-dual, and they're like, "Whoa, I don't like that," then I can see why you'd throw it away. I mean, I did initially. I without realizing it, it's 25, 30 years ago. Before I started, I sort of came across some spiritual stuff and just thought, well, that's not relevant. I didn't get it. What's it on about? Didn't look at it at all. And here we are, back around full circle. So it's completely okay. Of course it's okay. I mean, there's never any judgment in what we're saying. We're just pointing the best way we can. And it's part of the human condition, as we said earlier. I suppose what we're trying to say is, look, if the alien was asking us what would our recommendation be as from where we sit, what would we say? And I think what I'm experimenting with and having for the last few years is quite how much work, I don't even like that phrase, do you need to do on your psychology before you can see the non-dual? And the more I look in that, the less and less is the answer. That doesn't mean there aren't things later on you might not come back to and bang into, but you're banging into them knowing what you are, which makes it a much easier detangle. So the problem with the little experiment I'm doing is I'm bound to only be talking to people or coming across people who are ready to have that conversation with me. So I'm already ruling out most of the population. So you could argue, aha, there you go. So what one can argue, whereas I'm seeing it, oh my gosh, no, it's so much easier to go direct than I ever thought. That's only because they're in the conversation with me.
Yeah.
By definition, you've limited it already.
Yeah. You're always already talking to the a limited, a
Well,
level of
whether they know it or not,
yeah.
whether the system knows it or not, the fact they've even bothered to engage any of it. So, but I think the way it looks to me from my mind is that it's easier to be or possible and to be more direct than I ever thought. That doesn't mean we should get rid of all the other doorways. No. Because part of the richness of being in this aliveness is the tangling of psychology. I mean, there's something about the human condition that loves the drama and the unfolding and the beauty and the contrast of that. So it's what you said at the beginning. It's fun. I mean,
Mm.
it may look less fun when you're in the middle of suffering, but again, when you see it from a more awakened place, it does become more kind of, oh wow, gee, this
Mm.
is what a jigsaw puzzle this is,
Mm.
because you know it's only a pretend jigsaw puzzle of the avatar. Anyway, I sort of distracted you because I was asking you to give a little bit more about the few doorways that you point to now in your enlightenment event.
Yeah. And that, well, it fits beautifully with what you've just said, actually, because so the doorways we've started with Make It Visible during February. So those sessions are already underway and will be in there for anybody who joins after this point. March is going to be psychological, April emotional, May physical, and then June spiritual, which is basically direct path awakening,
Yeah.
and progressive. We've got one of each. We've got a direct path and a progressive path person. And then July is holistic, so ones which can't really be categorized into any of those different doorways. But what you've just said for me, and when you said about suffering, because suffering is such is the doorway. Like, suffering is the point at which, like I did, well, this can't be it. There must be something else. This isn't how my life's meant to be. It's such a brilliant opportunity for us to start asking those questions and to start looking in other places to see, how this is meant to be a nicer experience. Like, this is meant to be a more fun experience. So where's that? Like, how do I find that?
Do you think
Was
you
my
could
route.
just help people just define for 15 seconds each of those words, because they all mean different things, the body, psychological. So can you just give a little nutshell on what you mean when you say psychological, when you say body, when you say feelings, and spiritual? What do you mean? Just get
Yeah.
the York Notes version.
Yeah, cool. So psychological for me is thoughts and thinking. It's the either the narrative or the images that we have in our minds, in all its forms, from the inner critic through to ideas and analysis and logic, anything that's in the form of
So mainly cognitive?
cognitive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what you mean by
absolutely. Yeah.
psychological. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
cognitive, conceptual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, in the emotion, I've called it emotional enlightenment, but for me it includes feelings and emotions. And me and Sarah in our book, we distinguish between emotions and feelings. So emotions are a very natural movement of energy through our body, a very pure experience of energy moving through our body or through our system. Feelings are that kind of, we call them mental feeling states. So that's when our psychology, our thoughts, our cognition has got tangled, has been identified with in some way, and that's the yucky feeling stuff. That's the resistance, the worry, the arrogance as well. Anything where it feels yucky is where psychology's got been identified with. We get the two sides of the thought feeling coin.
Yeah,
So
it's funny because I use those words exactly the same meaning, completely different way around. So I call the emotion the thing that's got the meaning and the narrative and the ick to it, and the feeling is just the raw sensation.
okay.
But
So
the distinction we're making here is doesn't really matter whether you call it what you call it. It's the distinction.
It's knowing,
Yeah.
just energy moving in motion through the system. So so that's the emotional angle. The physical is the body. Yeah, so the physical body, the thing that we see in front of us. Just the body as it is, the manifestation of that physical experience.
And how do you pull apart then? Another question for you. How do you pull apart body and emotion? Because to me, they're so close in that I feel the body. I mean, I suppose I could look at it in the mirror or look at it now in my hand, but that doesn't do anything. It's only there because it's a felt thing.
The sensation.
So sensation. So how do you pull those apart?
Yeah. Oh my God. So literally, I said this so many times in the summit with the ladies who were speaking about emotion and physical. It was like literally they could have swapped places.
Yeah.
There's a hair's breadth between the two. For me, the physical is just the I guess I like that the one who Anna Sagar, who does the breath work for us. She was the one who had the headaches. So that for me is the distinction with the body. It's where we get physical ailments, physical challenges, health issues, often which medicine can't help or understand or do anything about, which for me are it's the system saying, bloody hell, listen to me. Like there is something going wrong here and you need to pay attention. I tend to see it as like it's the last port of call of the system. If we haven't listened to the psychology, we haven't listened to the feeling system, it's like the body goes, for God's sake, would you listen? You're totally misaligned here. You're totally in confusion of who you are and what's going on. So yeah, the body for me is distinct in that way because it's where it shouts to us to say,
so
really.
can I try and summarize that distinction in the appearance of it? Because it's all the same thing, but it appears. So feelings and emotions might, depending which word you use, might appear to be about my belief system about me or about the world. I feel that about that anxiety about going to work. I feel lonely when I'm on my own. I feel devalued when someone shouts at me, right? That would be a feeling or emotion. And then the body is when the sensation, which could be a feeling, turns up in what we would then look like locates in a head or a foot or a butt or a back or a neck or a pelvis or a bowel or a knee or a bone or a whatever. So it's the difference is in the appearance, because it's all the same system, of the location and where we've self-identified that to be. Is that the difference?
Yeah, and for me, just something that common or garden somebody would say, I've got this physical problem.
Yeah.
I've got this health problem. I've got this problem with my body.
Yeah.
You know, really, yeah.
So some people find it easier so going back to our doorways, to explore via, well, because of where it manifests, via that door, through the headaches or the arthritis or the chronic, anything chronic, my mind, guts, or whatever it is, right? Some people would go, oh, well, it just turns up in I get overwhelmed a lot, or I get anxious a lot, or I get depressed a lot, or I get this a lot. That'd be the second door. The first door would be, oh, well, it comes up in really noisy thinking where I get confused and I get conflicted by this and that, and that's in your sort of cognitive psychology.
Yeah, totally.
So they're the three. They're the same thing, listeners, by the way. They are absolutely all whirlpools. They just got a different hue or color or flavor and appearance to them.
Yeah.
So there are three. Number 4
was spiritual. So
now there's a word.
So we're essentially what we're saying is we're back in the awakening conversation. So this is the point at which, okay, so we've lightened the psychological, we've lightened the emotional, we've lightened the physical. Now we've disidentified from a bunch of stuff. There's now more space to look at, okay, but who am I really? Who am I before all of that stuff? So at that point we kind of bring the conversation back full circle to an awakening conversation.
Yes.
To look at the truth of our spiritual nature, the truth of our essence, the truth of who we are before the form of thoughts, feelings, bodies.
And the fifth one was just
holistic. So
one that didn't quite fit in the first 4.
So genuinely genuinely ones which couldn't, they couldn't be emphasized in any of those others. It was like, so one of them is energy transmissions. I'll say that a bit clearer. I always say it really fast. Energy transmissions, which is something I do now as well, which is it's all encompassing. It's like soaking water into the system. So you can't say, oh, that's just going to touch your psychology, your emotions, or your body. It's doing the whole thing. So so that last category is because they literally couldn't be differentiated in that way through a doorway.
And I think what I think, but I would start with number 4, and then do 1, 2, 3, and then number 5. So that's just Piers's view of the world. It's not right at all or anything. But I get completely how you've segregated those into the doorways, and really, once we've examined the spiritual one, and I'll put that in different language for people, what I would call the before psychology one, the awakening one, the recognizing what we are essentially one. The word spiritual is so loaded.
All the same thing.
The same thing. So we almost like go through the psychological, the feeling, emotion, and the body, and then we look at the awakening one, and then that is going to change how we see the other doors. I mean, that's the lovely thing, isn't it? But we almost have to visit the other doors first to come back to look at it. What the direct path is about, because people have heard us talk about direct path and indirect path or progressive path or even pathless path, is to, and what we were saying earlier is, how much do I need to look at the other doors before I go into door 4?
Yeah, well, who knows?
And that's the question that
that's unique.
I've been exploring.
There's a sweet shop right there.
There's a sweet shop right there, and that's what I've been exploring for the last few years of direct inquiry, and that's fascinating. But I think what you're offering is an encapsulation of those other doors. Now, it's probably worth just saying very quickly, if we can ever do that, what it is that you don't now even include on a series of enlightenment events. You know, what approaches are you going, I don't really see the value of that anymore? Not because they're wrong, but what have you disregarded by the wayside now that is distilled you down to even your 4 or 5?
I love that question. I hadn't even thought about it, but it's almost like going back to my old career. I just wouldn't go near anything that's about forcefully trying to change our experience, trying to overwrite anything with something that looks better or nicer. I wouldn't include anything around positive thinking, positive psychology. Yeah, trying to imagine great futures to feel better. Oh my God, none of that. Because all of this, all change happens from presence with it as it is. All of these modalities are purely about presence with everything as it is, inclusion of everything as it is, which is so in alignment with the truth of who we already are and how everything already is. So that was absolutely essential. And perhaps, in fact, that's probably why I was able to discern who was in and who was out when I was thinking about who to include.
Yes, brilliant.
Because it was so necessary.
Let's unpack that more, because I think it's a really interesting thing to unpack, because you said it nicely, and I totally get what you do. So the things that aren't included in what you're pointing to now, because there's many doorways that are, is and I'll put it on in my language, and you see whether it's playing to what you're saying. Anything that, and it's always innocent and accidental, because no one deliberately tries to point me in one direction, but anything that sort of is about trying to reinforce the scarcity or lack by suggesting do this. So if it's like, you know, maybe your life's not going brilliantly well, manifest a goal that you do want of creating abundance and love or this in the world, which is accidentally saying where you're at is not okay. It's coming from scarcity, and then it's giving you tools to overcome your lack.
Yeah, 100%.
So none of that is included in what we're talking about, because it doesn't align with the perfectly imperfect system of where we are and the truth, right?
Yeah.
You know, so that would be out. And as much as that stuff can tactically give people moments of kind of imagined relief, it doesn't move the needle, does it? We've been around it enough to know from our experience anyway.
Yeah, I think
examples of that.
It's a great distinction, and we can be moving and working with some challenging stuff. The difference is we're not with the challenging stuff going, shit, this is difficult. How the hell am I going to do this? We're just with it going, oh, here's the next thing to do. Here's the next thing to do. So, that's such a valuable point. We're not starting from this as a problem. We're not starting from this needs to change. We're not starting from, you don't have enough now. You need to be more of this. We're starting from this is perfect exactly as it is, and we're going to bring that presence to it that is the magic, that is the light of transformation, that is the ingredient.
And I suppose we're not also pointing to anything that says the outside world needs to be a certain way, which is another way of saying what you said. We're not pointing to anything prescriptive.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that's highly prescriptive, and by highly prescriptive we mean do this to create that, or this is the way you have to do it, that binds you into a psychological strategy, ritual, or practice, anything that binds you into that, I would be thinking, well, no, because that doesn't, again, fit with what we are, which is being lived in the moment flow emergence of what the right prescription is. It's never going to be one prescription. So bless NLP, you know, much as I loved it, it was very good at prescribing, hey, do that and you'll get this.
Yeah.
Now, funny enough, there were 40, 50 things it would prescribe, but that's because there isn't the right one. So anything that's prescriptive, no. Anything that's sort of saying, try and get to this outside world, this external landscape, no. Anything that's sort of saying come from trying to overcome scarcity and lack, no. Anything that I suppose puts it as there's levels to get to, which again, all these things might innocently, I'm not saying anyone's deliberately sort of saying, well, there's this level, then there's this level, this level. I mean, yes, they might look like there is, but there isn't really. And I suppose the other one we might chuck in from the other end, the very non-dual end, is anything that would not care about the human condition and be bypassy or kind of, hey, yeah, just be awareness and crap to the world. That doesn't fit with, because we are essentially that awareness, but we're also a wonderful psychological tangle. So anything that discounts the human condition, out.
Yeah. And the great thing is that even if we go down any of those routes, we find dead ends at some point. We find suffering at some point, which is perfect, because then it will point us back to
exactly
the kind of route we are more aligned to follow.
Yeah. And that's so I just remember these positivity so they were called negativity fasts that we used to go on in NLP world. This is 20 years ago, where the idea was see how long you can not have a negative thought for.
Oh, my life.
Stay having a positive thought, which is really quite hard work because it doesn't fit with the human condition, because having a negative thought is just as beautiful as having a positive thought, because what is negative and what is positive is made up. So they're both the same, really. But it's denying, isn't it? It's denying the whole point of being alive. And not only that, but the way our psychology presents itself to us is I use the word gift, I know it's trite, it is the indication there's something to have a little play with in the tangle world. So when we hit our dead end, what might appear like a dead end, it's not a dead end.
Yeah, it's your doorway. There's your doorway right there.
I mean, it sounds trite, isn't it? Oh, it's a dead end that turns into a doorway when you special. Well, no, but it is, because the point of being alive is to have the full gamut and richness of experience. The reason people think, no, I don't like that, because I've tried some of this full gamut of human experience, it's horrible, it suffers, I feel blah, 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 is because you're having the full gamut of the human experience without knowing what you truly are at an awakened level. And then it can look scary, uncomfortable, can't cope with it. So the beautiful thing about the awakening, which is why we prioritize it so much, is that it then allows you to have everything else as part of the learning extravaganza, rather than I need to avoid that, I can't have that, I need to do that.
Totally. It's all been about seeing these opportunities in life which we've normally turned away from and said, well, that's terrible, that's awful, I don't like that, let's shut the door on that one, let's suppress that one, let's avoid that one, let's distract from that one. We're absolutely inviting that turnaround to go, no, this is rich stuff here. This is here's your doorways right here. I've been talking to people with all the conversations of, you're literally like gathering a shopping list of all these places of resistance that like amazing. There you go. There's your stuff to now move forward with, to get curious about, rather than, oh, I don't like this, I'm going to shut the door and turn away.
I guess a version of that will happen at the end. And then you see all that stuff that you made visible at the beginning, like all my challenges and issues and woes, or whatever you want to call them. Once you see them, once you've been through the process, the river, you're like, oh, wow, brilliant, bring it on. They're visible, but they have a very different relationship to it, and all of that. So the program is completely circular. I mean, it's going to be a loop for people where they're gonna, because there's no real distinction between a thought and a feeling, emotion, and the body. It's all the same thing, right? And even what you might call in the holistic field of energy transmission and Reikis and whatever's, that's all the same. It's just a different hue and flavor. It's segmented. So if we try and pull this back round now, this Martian who's been listening to us going, okay, well, you know, I can sort of see why there's so many doorways, is because the system does appear to fragment or into different ways it shows up. But diversity of psychological objects, and in that including feelings, emotions, and the body, of mental activity, shall we call it, inner and external, is vast. So it could look like any of these things is the point, but actually they all go back.
Yeah.
They all go back, don't they?
Yeah.
To
I've been using the analogy of the hand. You know, if each of the fingers and the thumb are the doorways, but they're all going back to the same space. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. We'll just begin where we begin, and that's the same thing. It's because whichever thread we pull on, whichever doorway we move through, it's all one connected whole anyway.
and
So we've got full freedom.
Yeah. And it's why one-to-one work for us as coaches is different to group work. Because when you're in group work, you're trying to guess where most people want to start which finger. And you're trying to give them a bit of each finger, each doorway, a bit of this door, a bit of this door, a bit of this door, this door. And people will resonate at different parts of the day or the afternoon or the 5 days or whatever you're doing. One-to-one, you can very quickly nip to the door that, oh, okay, the body, let's go and buy there. So they're not different, they are the same, but individuated, you know, we're going to have different doorways. So when people say to us, where do I start, it's kind of an impossible question to ask until you've banged into some doors and thought there's no door there. You know, so I think if we were trying to help listeners now go, well, okay, thanks so much, I'm just totally confused, I've now didn't realize there were so many doors, you know, what would we say? Well, what would your kind of advice or pointing be to someone who's been listening to this?
I would really say, like, just start wherever you start. It really doesn't matter. Start, ideally, you've got somewhere that you start that you go, oh, that feels like a good place to start. Like that feels like the right place. But that's exactly why in the event I'm presenting a whole range of options, because you can come and join for every single month and taste and sample and really try out and see which ones feel good, which ones feel aligned, and then you might stick with that one for a little while, but at least then you know there's a whole smorgasbord of other options, so that when this one has kind of done the work it needs to do, if there's then a desire for something else, it's like, well, cool, I know there's a whole bunch of other doorways available.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come back to that one later, but at least, yeah, I've got that new information. It's not that door for the moment.
Yeah.
So we literally can't go wrong.
And I was thinking, as you were saying that, how do I answer that question? Because I don't know if I've asked it myself. I probably have. But so I was thinking, of course, you go with what feels right, because people don't tend not to. So just we're being lived. But then I thought, well, actually, yeah, I agree with what Helen's saying. But I think I would, maybe this is just my current experiment, but try direct first, right? Try pathless or direct first. Because if that one door is open, brilliant, because then you can go and see all the other doors later to detangle. If that one just looks ridiculous or resisted or scary, okay, fair enough, that one's not there yet. Go and try some other doors, whether it's the more emotional or the psychological or the body. So I suppose my slight variant on what you're saying is, and this is more about me than the rest of the 7 billion people on this planet probably, is just because if that door does open directly, woohoo! It doesn't mean we will ignore the other doors, but later on you'll look at the other doors and go, okay, I can now see through that door and I see in that room and I can see what's there, the tangles, but they don't look anywhere near as tangly as they did. Or the tangles are like, okay, that's cool, I love a tangle, give me the tangle, right? So I suppose that would be my my take. Does that make sense?
Well, it totally makes sense, because we've talked about this before, haven't we, about the shop front of what we're both doing, and your shop front is absolutely direct path. Like that's what the front facing, like this is your thing. Whereas mine is naturally much more of a mishmash, for want of a
Yeah.
better word, that just keeps coming to mind. It does include all of that stuff, and there's and I know yours does too. But yes, if anything, my work with Wild Figures much more. The shopfront is much more about enlightenment.
Then
While
awakening. Yeah.
that with
Yeah.
Thoughtful Raven for the book being much more about awakening.
And it's interesting because if I have a client and the direct door path isn't quite open yet, I do then go and play around all the others. I just do, because I guess 25 years of being coaching, you're bound to. I'm not just going, go away then, come out when you're ready. No, because it's too much fun once you've worked with that client a little bit to not do that. And sometimes you then go knock on the door 2 weeks later and it's open. Oh, no, it's not yet. So the doors are never really shut. They just have an apparent closeness to them. So that's the lovely thing, isn't it? That's the lovely thing, and we said at the beginning, how surprising what we do now compared to what we did. So the doors are never really shut, just different degrees of opening.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what else we can say that would be useful to people. Maybe listeners can ask us questions if we don't manage by the time we finish recording. But anything else that would be helpful for people at this moment?
I don't know if there is. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. I hope that we've presented a kind of a map of what's available and why it's available, like what everything's doing, why it's doing that. Yeah, I'd love to hear if it's brought questions up for people that they feel haven't been answered, or that they want clarifying further. Yeah, I think we've covered all the stuff we intend to set out with.
Good. Well, listeners, invitations there from Helen and from myself. Please share. Love to know what you've heard. And Helen, I just wish you all the best with your enlightenment event. That is not an event. It is a 6-month, I guess, series of webinars and
it actually goes on to October. Yeah.
October.
So when you said before about that cyclical nature, after July, we have some integration time and some
Brilliant
reconnection to all of what we've visited already.
Well, I'm sure people will get a bunch out of it, and we'll put the details in the show notes if people want to join. So now not only can you get Helen's book, you can also join her online extravaganza event. So Helen, thanks for giving us some of your very precious time, because it must be precious given how much you create in the world. So thanks for coming on again, and no doubt you will be a visitor again to the Quality of Mind podcast. Who knows what to talk about, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Piers. Thanks so much.
Great. So listeners, as usual, have fun being curious. Please share this. And if you have any questions for Helen or I, just let us know. Listeners, as usual, have fun being curious, and catch you next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.